Hello, everyone, and welcome to Character Day. I'm so glad you're all joining us, and I'm so excited about our next speaker. Emily Esfahani Smith is the author of The Power of Meaning, Finding Fulfillment in a World Obsessed with Happiness. This book is so good. I highlighted the whole thing. It's right here. It was a key book when we were making the film that premiered today, 30,000 Days, and it was so wonderful the way that she brought all the history and these ideas around meaning. I loved it. And as a writer, she draws on psychology, philosophy, and literature. I'm going to click over to you. To illustrate the human experience, why we are the way we are, and how we can find grace and meaning in a world that is full of suffering. She's also an instructor in positive psychology at the University of Pennsylvania, as well as an editor at the Stanford University Hoover Institute. So welcome, Emily. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thanks for having me, Tiffany. I'm so happy to be here.
Excellent. So let's see. Just for the audience, I love the way you defined meaning, and I think it would be really good to set the stage. How do you define meaning?
So meaning comes from connecting and contributing to something beyond yourself. It could be your family, it could be some career, it could be God if you have a spiritual inclination. And when psychologists ask people if their lives are meaningful, people rate their lives as meaningful if these three conditions are satisfied. The first is that they believe their lives are significant. In other words, they think their lives have value and worth. The second one is that they feel their lives are driven by a sense of purpose. So there's some aim or principle that kind of organizes their activities and gives them a reason to move forward. And the final one is coherence. So you don't think of your life and your experiences as random and disconnected. You don't see the world as senseless, but your life makes sense to you and the world makes sense to you.
That's beautiful. And why do you think, as you know, and you mentioned in the book, and we've read, there's like thousands of books on happiness, and then finally we're kind of regrounding it in meaning and purpose. And why do you think we had those two waves? What do you think that's about?
I think there's a number of things that are driving it. Yeah, and so as you say, part of what inspired me to write my book was that our culture is just so obsessed with happiness. There are thousands of books published on happiness, thousands of articles, and I came to see for a number of different reasons that maybe what we should be pursuing is meaning, but at the end of the day, what we actually care about is whether our lives have worth, whether we made some positive impact on the world, things like that. And I think that maybe one of the things that was driving the kind of happiness boom was the emergence of this new social science research on happiness over the last 2 decades. The field of positive psychology was founded in 1998, 2000. And if you look at a graph of kind of the research on happiness in that time, it just shoots up around 2000. And then, of course, the media covered it, and there was this kind of effect of this magnifying effect. And it makes sense. People want to be happy. It's totally natural, and I have nothing against happiness. And so I think that this yearning people have for happiness, along with this research, kind of came together to create this kind of effect, this zeitgeist. I think that we're turning to meaning now, though, because people are realizing that they actually want something deeper than simple happiness. Happiness feels good in the moment. I like to be happy. I'm sure you do as well. But we also want to know that our lives have value and worth, and that we're doing something that makes a difference for others. I think there's this other part of it, too, which is that our religion is no longer at the center of public life. And so that used to be kind of a default path to meaning for people. And in the absence of that, we have to search for it on our own. And so that might be what's driving this renewed interest in meaning as well.
That's a fantastic point. And when we were working on the film, there's definitely a relation to the dip in religion and people needing to kind of rise up and find it for themselves. And what do you think the connection between developing one's character and meaning and purpose is?
So Aristotle, I write about Aristotle in my book, and he talks about how a good life is a life of virtue. And what that means for him is that you are cultivating the best within you and and using that to kind of contribute to society. So he didn't think of, a good life as this idle life, but as an active life where you're engaged with the world around you, you're giving to the world around you. And the best way that you can give is by cultivating those strengths of character, your talents, and your virtues, and this kind of unique cocktail of things that make you you, and then contribute those. So I think that that's what the connection is that character is who you are. It's the best of who you are. And if you want to live a life of purpose, then giving that away to others is the best way to do that.
Beautiful. Yeah, that's so wonderful. And what advice do you give? I'm sure you've been on your book tour. People are like, how do I bring more meaning into my life? What do you say to them?
I guess I would say that, there's this idea in our culture that to live a meaningful life, you have to do something big and epic. You have to be the next Mark Zuckerberg, found the next Facebook. You have to end a humanitarian crisis. You have to, be an Instagram celebrity. I'm kind of hearing that more and more these days with the rise of...
No, that's the downfall.
I know. So, and I would just caution people to say that, most of us are going to lead ordinary lives, and we're not going to, contribute something great and lasting to the world. And yet, even in spite of that, we can all find meaning in our kind of local communities, within our families, in our neighborhood, within our office spaces, by contributing to others, serving others, and bringing that character that we talked about and giving it as a gift to others.
That's so beautiful. I saw that New York Times piece that you wrote, I think last week.
Right.
Really interesting, the kind of traffic it got too, because the title was something like, you'll know what the title was. It was like, you don't have to be famous to live a good life. What was the title? The
title was You'll Never Be Famous, and That's Okay.
Yeah, because our culture has skewed so much to this fame for fame's sake without the hard work also to get there. Or I don't know, it's this weird inverted model of ideal of what people are striving for. So I really loved that piece and the message that you were saying in it. I think also, how has your sense of, just with everything going on in our world right now, do you feel, Karen Armstrong talks about the new Axial Age, and maybe it'd be best if you describe the original Axial Age, and do you think we're living in a new era of a new Axial Age?
Right. So Karen Armstrong wrote a wonderful book that I recommend called The Great Transformation, where she talks about this this kind of global shift that happened several thousand years ago, where you see the emergence of Buddhism, you see the emergence of Jainism, all these different kind of religious traditions, Zoroastrianism, Confucianism, that that have at their center this idea of kind of compassion and ahimsa, like non-suffering, non-harm, and that this was a revolutionary idea at the time. And in terms of, are we living in a new Axial Age? I don't know about that. I mean, maybe we are. It's hard to kind of categorize a historical period while you're living through it. But I do think that there's something really interesting happening, which is, in so many ways, life has never been better. So many forms of suffering are being eliminated. People are being lifted out of poverty. There's more wealth in the world. Countries are freer. People have more human rights. I mean, there's a lot of talk about how bad things are getting, but if you take the historical perspective, it's actually this upswing. And yet, at the same time, people feel worse. So rates of depression have been rising, rates of anxiety, the suicide rate has been rising. It reached a 30-year high in the US last spring, 2 springs ago, I should say. Of course, there's the opioid epidemic. So there's these other forms of kind of spiritual and psychological suffering. And so
a vacuum, almost like a vacuum, a sense of a vacuum. Yeah,
exactly. And Viktor Frankl, the Holocaust survivor, talked about people living with an existential vacuum, this emptiness. And I think that maybe that's what we're seeing. And I think it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, that people have this yearning for meaning, and some of the shared sources of meaning are no longer there to satisfy it, like religion, like community, like tradition. And so these other things are coming in to kind of try to claim that, like this search for success, this search for fame, this search for happiness. And yet what can only satisfy it is the pursuit of meaning. And so that's kind of what I see happening at a cultural level.
I love your perspective. And I'm so glad you reminded all the viewers, which I know we do in our films as well, that we are living in an amazing time. And I think sometimes with the news and we're so bombarded as if we're not, and I'm sure that's a self-fulfilling prophecy in a lot of ways. But I do think that you're speaking to this very interesting point that there is this modern day vacuum. And I think a book like yours, I'll say again, because it was my favorite book this summer, The Power of Meaning.
Yeah.
So good. And I'm just so glad that you are out there in the world. And we're so happy to have you as part of Character Day. And just thank you for all your amazing work.
Thank you, Tiffany. And I love your work as well. So it's such an honor to be here with you.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too.